Okay, I've got two Glock 19 compact 9mm carry pistols. Um, this one is the Generation 4, and it has 3 pins, 1, 2, 3, and then the Generation 5 has 2 pins. They're just very minor differences with each generation, but once you have a Glock figured out, it's pretty easy. You don't have to be a gunsmith, and that's the beauty of the Glocks. I'm going to push the Gen 4 version away. We're going to field strip the Gen 5 and show you the things that you would need to know to either replace a part or to clean it, but just understanding it. Again, you can just be the owner of the gun and do this without any problem. You only really need one tool, that's some type of a punch. Okay, so I'm going to clear it. I already cleared it, got all the ammo and magazines in a different part of the house, and then I'm going to still point it in a safe direction and treat it like it's loaded and press the trigger, and then I'm going to seat my web of my hand in this area, grab around on the slide, and I'm only going to pull it back just about 1/8 of an inch so it doesn't reset the trigger that I just fired, dry fired. So it'll come back just a little bit, hold it there, and then these two little tabs I want to grab on each side and press them downward and hold them all the way down, and then release this. The slide will come right off. Okay, now we have the upper and the lower, or the slide and the frame, receiver, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. And let's see, we'll do the tear down of the slide first. So if you're just cleaning it, you may be able to just scrub this out a little bit with a brush, spray it with some gun cleaner, maybe hold it upside down over a trash can outside and spray it upward and let it sort of run out, and that might be good enough cleaning for you. We'll go a little further than that in a minute. You can also just take the guide rod, press it forward, it just lifts out. It sits right in this little half moon little area, and then lift, and the barrel will come right out. And that's enough to do most things to your Glock, just a simple cleaning. A simple cleaning goes a long way. Okay, you can just lightly spray and then scrub with a brush, and then come back in here with a cloth or Q-tips and wipe the little slide rail slots out and just get a lot of that carbon off, and then clean the breech face off a little bit, this place where the firing pin comes out. I would be careful getting solvents and cleaners on this optic, so I would shield that somehow with a rag or something. But anyway, so let's go a little bit further with the slide, and I'm going to start putting things in this little tray. You could get one of these little pads and explains the assembly and all the parts just to help you, but it's really not that complicated. So I'm going to slip my punch in this little area and push it forward. It'll sit in there in front of this little sleeve, and hold that sleeve this way so it'll allow me to take this cap off. Okay, and then release that, and you'll see that the striker assembly comes out. You could just spray this off. You can actually take this apart. The way that I take it apart is I slip it into this, and that striker tab there, I just hold it over so that it blocks and doesn't go all the way in, and that gives me a sort of a way of compressing the spring and taking these two little shot cups off and putting them back on. It's a real easy way I've learned to work with that. We're not going to go quite that far. Now, if I take my thumbnail or the edge of a screwdriver, I can just grab this spring and extractor push rod. The metal part goes in first, and the plastic part is toward the rear. You could clean that up a little bit, and then there's a safety plunger that's spring loaded. I could just hold that, keep it from flying away, and just barely press it. Then this extractor should come out. If it's dirty, it may get a little stuck, and that round part of it is what goes to the rear. See that round part, the hook, that little claw goes toward the front. That's what grabs the rim of your cartridge and extracts it out of the chamber once it's fired. Okay, the spring-loaded plunger, it has a little bit more of a square end going this way and a little bit more of a round football end going this way on Gen 5. Just pay attention to what it looks like when it comes out, and usually it'll fall out. You might need to tap it a little bit. Just don't lose this spring, okay? This little spring will sit in there. It doesn't always grab, so track that all the time. You might want to have an extra one around in case it flies on the floor. It could take you an hour to find it. So that's completely broken down. You could even take a Q-tip and clean out this striker channel. There is a plastic sleeve in there that you don't have to replace. It's called a channel liner, and once in a blue moon that'll get worn out enough to need to be replaced. It takes a special tool to pull it out, but we're not going to go that far. And then you'll see a lot of carbon built up in these areas. Try to get all that black stuff off of there. It'll cake up on there. All right, so now let's go for the Generation 5 lower. I'm going to push out this pin that is holding the trigger housing, and then I'm going to press this one out that goes through this locking block and the trigger. Okay, now on a Gen 5, you don't have to line anything up really. You just tap it, and it should come right out. Just a little gentle tap, and that'll break it loose. That's what I like about Gen 5. I don't have to fight that too much. And we'll see in the Gen 4 how it's not always quite so easy. And then I'm going to take this punch and set it under the edge of the locking block and just pry that up, and it'll come out. And at that point, I can take this slide lock lever, whatever you want to call it, off, go back to the list and see what their little name is for it. All brands, and over time they've called things different names, and I'm not going to argue about it. So grab this extractor. This is this little, it's slightly bent, that's okay. It's tuned that way, and pull out the whole trigger assembly. Now this, you have to pay special attention putting it back together, because this X-shaped, see it's kind of an X-shaped cruciform, like a cross, the front of it slips into a little tab there. So really need to make sure that gets back under that little tab on the front. That's the spring that does your trigger reset. Now I'm going to just turn it a little bit sideways and up, and it'll just slip out of there. Now I could remove this connector out of the slot, but you want to be careful not to bend it, and then you want to press it back in like this all the way to make sure that you don't bend. That's tuned to a certain angle, and that controls what your trigger reset feels like. Okay, so I'm going to put it back together. I want to sort of angle this in, and if you get that corner in there, it should go under that little tab. Once in a while, I have to get in there first and sort of lift that spring clip up a little bit. Okay, then this will kind of sit beneath that edge of that connector. Just hold it together like that, and then I'm going to put the shoe in first through the hole, and then this trigger housing will slide right down into there. Okay, and then at this point on Gen 5, this is where you would go ahead before the locking block and put in the ambidextrous slide lock lever. And then the locking block goes in oriented like this with the little forks toward the front, and it slides into this little place. And then you can see the hole through there where the pin goes, the front pin. It doesn't have to go in a particular way. It's got two little detents in it, and sometimes you may have to tap it, and you can take the side of your punch and sort of feel a little place where it kind of rests in there perfectly centered. Okay, and then the trigger housing pin, you don't even really need the tool. You can take your thumbnail and just press this plastic pin in until it's flush. Do it however you want to though. And then now the trigger will go forward and lock, and then if I unlock it, it'll come back, and you can see all of that will feel pretty good. Okay, and the lower part's back together. It's that simple. You can go through this very quickly. All right, now for the slide, I guess what I'll do is first I'll, really doesn't matter, but first I guess what I'll do is put in this plunger. Again, on Gen 5, it's oriented a little more sloped in, goes to the center, and it'll go in like this. Sometimes I'll push it upward while I hold the slide like this and go up into there. But I want to make sure when I press the spring, it doesn't make little clicky sounds. I want to make sure that it's centered and that spring feels nice and silent and smooth. And while I have it depressed, I'm going to go ahead and put this extractor in there with a hook forward, round part to the rear. And like I said, I had it backwards. Slide that in there, and then what I'll do is, while that's there, I'll put in the striker all the way in. Okay, that should hold it there for a second, because the little this little spring will come off if you're not careful, and this can fly across the room. Just stick it back on the end. Metal in first. You could probably put these two in either order. Now, here's where little trick comes back into play. I'm going to press this sleeve and in a little so I can get my punch back between this collar and the striker tab, and then pull it forward. That's going to allow me to slip this cap. You can see the little ridges are on the outer part toward the rear. Slip it down in there. It'll only go in so far, and just hold it, because what's stopping it is a spring-loaded rod. And then I'll press that in, and then that'll allow the cap to go the rest of the way in. Now once this is in and it's firmly in there, and you can function check by sort of pushing, pulling on this spring-loaded striker. It feels good. And then you'll see that it doesn't come out of the, doesn't prairie dog out of the little hole there until you press the plunger in, then it comes out. And then after it's fired, it comes back and kind of locks back behind. So you want to function check that safety. Make sure it will not come out unless this plunger's depressed. And then it locks back behind there. So all of that feels good, looks good. Now I'll just put my guide rod back in and spring with the barrel, and it's back together. Now I'll function check it. Okay, feels good again. I'll do the Gen 4 in another video.